Teachers, what was the worst thing you had to confiscate from a student? Story 1. My mom has had stories about what she confiscated from lower elementary age students, K through 3. The usual prank items like whoopee cushions, sure, but one time a student was playing with this weird box. The box was locked, so she couldn't put it in the confiscated bin. She put it on top of a cabinet. About an hour later, it started ringing. Furiously, it took some doing to get the box open. Turns out this kid's parents were professional chefs, so the kid had grabbed every timer in the house, set them for the maximum amount of time, locked the box, brought it to school, and played with it so that it would get confiscated and ring loudly. The whole class erupted with laughter and screaming. A true agent of chaos. My friend and I did something similar when I was in school. We had these timers in science class. One day before class, we set around 20 of them to go off at roughly the same time during the middle of the lesson. We hid them everywhere. Cupboards, people's bags, best of all, above the ceiling tiles in the classroom. Eventually, one of them goes off first. The teacher knows what's up and starts looking for it, finds it and turns it off. The timing couldn't have been better. Another one, and then another one, followed by a symphony of beeping from every possible angle. We did own up to it and had a few detentions, but I think the memory of that moment is still worth it. Reminds me of when my whole class set up a prank on our science teacher. We were using digital stopwatches in class to test reaction times, and before the teacher collected them, we all set the timer for X amount of minutes. Cue the teacher spending the rest of the lesson sporadically jumping when a timer went off and desperately sorting through the box to find out which one it was. I have done this as well, except mine was even worse. We had a basket full of digital stopwatches, around 50 I think, and I set all of them to ring 3 minutes after each other. Example, 14, 1403, 1406, etc. Then I forgot about the prank. A few months later, when I asked a friend about it, apparently the teacher got so sick of trying to find the correct stopwatch that after a dozen alarms, he threw a jacket over the basket and stowed it inside a cupboard. I felt bad about it, so I snuck into the classroom when it was empty and disabled all of the alarms. The class I teach told me a story about a prank they pulled on their music teacher. They all set their alarms at the same time and set the alarm sounds to all kinds of animal noises. Everyone's alarm went off at the same time and a cacophony of animal noises ensued. Some people had multiple alarms set, so when all the phones were confiscated, they went off again at the secretary's office. Sounds a lot like a prank a few of us pulled at a camp. One of the leaders was way too keen on confiscating phones from us for the most minor amount of use. On one occasion, he demanded a phone immediately and got angry when the kid tried to finish doing something on it first. The kid explained that he was turning off the alarms he had set for the morning, and the leader argued that he'd just turn the phone off, so the alarms wouldn't ring anyway. This being the era of Nokia, naturally, we all knew the phone would turn itself on when the alarm was due to go off, and tried to explain this to said teacher. He denied it, of course. Cue us all agreeing to set alarms for random intervals during the night and intentionally getting our phones confiscated. Due to the limited size of the camp venue, the leader had to keep anything he confiscated beside his bed. He was not happy, but continued to deny that a phone could turn itself on to trigger an alarm. Story 2. Preschool teacher here. I had to convince a 4-year-old that his mom's wedding ring should go into a special box on the front desk, instead of on the finger of a 6-year-old girl that he had a crush on. Later, he brought in his dad's car keys and a bottle opener. One of my wife's special needs students, 8th grade, basically brought in the contents of his mom's jewelry box in his backpack and gave an antique emerald/diamond ring to a girl he had a huge crush on. He was in my science class for inclusion. To her credit, she called me aside and gave me the ring. I called the sped teacher, and she found the rest of the loot in his backpack and called the parents. Turns out that ring and some of the other items were worth thousands. They gave the girl $100 for a reward, which I thought was nice. Story time. In kindergarten, roughly 1987, my sister came home from school with an engagement ring. She told my parents that a boy at school proposed to her. It was a legit diamond engagement ring. My family was stationed overseas, military. My dad had to go to her school to track down who the ring belonged to. He found the boy's mother, also in the military, and gave it back to her. We have been stationed in several other places since. Cut to about 15 years later, my parents divorced in the interim. That boy that gave my sister the ring was now my stepbrother. Turns out that the boy's mother was stationed at the same place as my dad. This is not a cute story. It's a weird story. When I was in the 5th grade, my classroom sweetheart brought me a really pretty ring. The very same night, my teacher called my mom and asked about it. Apparently, it was his great-great-great-grandmother's ring that he stole. My mom asked me, and I showed her, and she said the teacher asked if it was okay to swing by and grab it. I remember the next day, the boy couldn't sit down and avoided me from then on. He had a new sweetheart soon after, but as an adult, I imagine the reason he couldn't sit was because his mom spanked his ass the next week. Story 3. My wife is a teacher, and one of her 1st graders brought her 2 hard seltzers because her mom said they're good after a long day and she deserved them. My friend taught at a prestigious all-boy high school. She was grocery shopping and buying a couple of cases of wine to restock her wine rack. Of course, she runs into a student and his mother. The kid says, "Hi, Miss Shh. Wow, that is a lot of alcohol." His mom looks at him and says, "You're probably the reason she has to drink like that." The teacher replies, "No, it's all of them." For Christmas that year, the same kid gave her a $200 gift card to a wine store. Totally believe the sorrow and empathy motivation from the kid to his teacher for this. Not school-related, but proof kids listen to parents and commercials and believe it all. My 5-year-old heard me and the wife talking about being stressed, and he earnestly said, "You need a Serta mattress. It reduces stress." Reminded me of a story from my sister, who is a teacher. At break or lunch, a 3rd grader popped open a Truly. My sister had to go grab it, and turned out the kids just grabbed something from the fridge when packing snacks or lunch. It was covered in fruit, so the kid figured it was just like a soda or something. Which was hilarious to me because I did the same thing a few weeks before dog sitting. They had a fridge in the garage. I thought I grabbed a Diet Coke, but halfway to work I popped it open and it was a wine spritzer or something. My student brought me a hard seltzer as well. I teach high school special ed. The student was notorious for bringing gifts, random snacks, toys, etc., that they found in the house and would bring them to school and give to staff. She gave me a hard seltzer thinking it was just a soda. Luckily, my staff member decided to see if she had any more in her backpack, which she did. She was going to drink one at lunch as well. Story 4. I had to confiscate hand sanitizer from a student who decided to drink it to get drunk and threw up everywhere. One of my classmates did this when I was in high school. This was when we were juniors. Like, if we were in elementary school, I might be able to see how a less educated kid might do this, but high school? Come on, dude, we took chemistry together. We both know you can't drink it. Later found out he was an alcoholic and left the school to go to rehab, so his desperation made a little more sense. But still, there's a poison control label on it for a reason. In 8th grade, half of our classrooms banned hand sanitizer because all of the 7th graders were drinking it to be drunk. I and a group of friends went to an event after school hours and got bored, so we snuck away and just wandered the school together. Someone had dared me to drink the hand sanitizers, so I did. And after all of us daring each other to drink it, each time we saw one, we'd take shots. By the end of the night, some of us were stumbling and slurring our words, and we heard someone coming up the stairs. Both boys and girls of this group booked it into the bathroom, locking you and maybe 1 or 2 others in that stall with toy, and we just waited till we heard a lock at the door, and once we realized what it was, we all immediately came out of our stalls and realized we had no way of unlocking it. We just sat on the bathroom floor for a while until someone said that they know there's an ultimate key in the office and that she thinks she could fit one of the young petite girls through the window above the door. It was a lot of work, but we managed to get the girl out, and shortly after she came back with the key and let us out. Middle schoolers are scary, and as a junior in high school now, please don't go around drinking hand sanitizer. Luckily, none of us got sick, but it could cause a lot of harmful stuff. Jesus, that reminds me of a story a friend of mine told me. Mind you, this was in a university-level chemistry class, not some high schoolers dicking around as high schoolers do. This bright bulb knew that the chemical name for drinking liquor had an anal in it. Well, they had a bottle in the lab that said something to that effect, so he took a big old swig of it. What was in the bottle was methanol, which, for those of you in the peanut gallery who don't know, breaks down into formaldehyde, aka embalming fluid, in the body. The teacher caught him just as he swallowed, and, thank feck, rushed him to the hospital. Dude was lucky he didn't die a horrible, painful death, though from what I recall, he had paid a hell of a painful price for being such an absolute moron. Alas, putting things that shouldn't be in your mouth into your mouth is not a realm exclusive to children. Story 5. The weirdest one was definitely the fish in a vase they found during locker checks. It was in an unassigned locker someone had added a lock to. Inside was a live betta fish, in about as large a vase as you can fit in a locker, fully decorated. Someone had clipped a little book light to the top of the vase, presumably so the fish wasn't in the dark all the time. No one claimed to know whose it was or how long it had been there, so it lived in the coach's office for at least that year. I kept a goldfish in a Mountain Dew bottle in my locker in the 7th grade for some godforsaken reason. I had it for almost the entire year before it died. It was then flushed down the toilet, but I would feed it goldfish flakes 3 times a week, and take care of it. Oh god, the amount of ammonia? It's honestly very surprising it lasted that long. Were you somehow getting water changes done in school? For reference, the recommended tank size for a pair of fancy goldfish is a 40-gallon. For one, a 30-gallon will do, but it's not recommended as they're social. They get weekly or more larger water changes as they're incredibly messy fish. Many people use sump filters, which are basically an entire tank of just filter media below the main tank, which adds water volume, of course, and has more room for beneficial bacteria. Common goldfish who have one tail fin and are sold for cents as feeders can grow about a foot long and need a pond, basically. Story 6. Not a teacher, but a bus driver. I had to confiscate a 5th grader's cell phone a few days ago, specifically because he was showing hardcore porn to 1st graders with it. Lots of phone calls that day. My school banned 1st grade through 5th grade from having phones because the 4th/5th graders would constantly show hardcore porn to the younger kids. I'm starting to see a pattern here. This reminds me of a story from when I was in elementary school, but way more innocent. We were in 4th grade and working with 1st graders on a little project of putting together a fun presentation to make our combined classes. Basically an exercise to teach us about how to search for stuff to include. Well, I don't really remember why, but we decided to include a picture of a person. The first image result, I forget the search term, was basically an anatomy pic of a naked male, and the kid screamed as loud as he could, "Oh god, he's naked!" to the whole class. I basically just hit back as fast as I could and told the teacher to check the browser history to see that it was accidental. After that was a blur and nothing bad happened, but it definitely makes me laugh looking back. I'm sure the teacher was entertained after the situation calmed down too. 10 to 11-year-olds are extremely curious about these kinds of stuff. When I was at that age, around 2005, the cool kids back in the classroom broke the internet block using VPN and went straight to hardcore porn as soon as the teacher left the classroom just for fun. I also remember that I spent a lot of time with my buddies finding ways without our parents knowing to see controversial content, such as Saw 1, 2, and 3 and Happy Tree Friends. I believe since we were not allowed to see these kinds of things, it was the main reason we were seeking it. A serious question. How do you keep kids away from porn? I know for a fact some kids are exposed to them very young, either accidentally or vice versa. So I'm very paranoid. The other person with parental control is way off. Unless you're a wizard with your home internet, your kid will spend way more time trying to find porn than you will spend trying to keep it from them. Don't give them porn, and maybe even put up some basic blocks or confiscate porn you find, but accept that they're going to figure their own crap out, and you can't do anything to stop it. The best way to handle this is to talk to your kids about sex and be real with them about overindulgence. Answer all of their questions and look up answers you don't honestly know. Don't be shy, don't get angry, and don't bring God into it. Let them know that it's normal to have feelings and curiosities. Establish boundaries for hygiene and modesty's sake, and really drill in that moderation is important. Also, help them understand that any image of an underage person is CP. If they take a picture of themselves and send it to someone, they're creating and distributing it. If they see anyone passing around nudes of anyone from school, that's also ultra illegal and can ruin some lives. You will not stop a kid from getting access to porn. Full stop. You can equip them to emotionally handle the experience though. Story 7. A dead squirrel. I taught preschool at the time. I once did that too. My primary school girlfriend got kissed by a dude from her class, and I was super mad because he was stronger than me and I couldn't just get back at him with the same thing. The next day, I hear animals fighting on my way to school, and moments later, a squirrel falls dead from a tree. I have no idea what killed it, but it didn't look wounded. So I threw out my lunch and put it in my now empty bag. The kid who kissed my girlfriend was and still is a notorious liar, so when they found it in his bag, nobody believed it wasn't him, and he couldn't say anything to prove it wasn't. He wasn't even able to say that it wasn't even his bag where the squirrel was, because he was known for stealing other kids' lunches. I guess it was my perfect crime. A live penguin. My mom, a public school teacher who has long since retired, once took her 4th grade class on a field trip to the local aquarium, where a few little penguins were roaming around sorta unconfined. Not sure why. Anyway, when they got back to school later that afternoon, one of the kids was hanging out in the coat/backpack area, looking more than a little guilty. When she approached him to ask what was going on, she noticed his backpack smelled awful. He opened it up, and inside was a terrified penguin covered in its own filth. The kid had just scooped it up and stuffed it in his pack. Story 8. When I was in 5th grade, there was an active market in live bees. Some kids figured out that the weight of the average 5th grader briefly stepping on a bee in the grass would stun it for about a minute, without actually killing it. They started going out in teams to scout bees on the field, stun them, and carefully scoop them into plastic sandwich bags. They'd then sell them to other students who'd release them in classrooms to waste class time and scare people. You could get honeybees for 25 cents a piece. Bumblebees and yellow jackets cost more. Teachers and school admins started cracking down on this. Teachers literally confiscated live bees in plastic bags from students when found, and they eventually had to start having someone watch the field to catch students in the act. A lot of people said they had something similar. And where was this? This was in the East Bay area, Northern California. If that sounds like you, it was the elementary school that had the same name as the nearby community swimming pool, and the custodian named Fred, who everyone thought was the best. This was the spring of '05 though. It may have happened in other years too. We had a similar thing going on when I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, where sand bees took up residence in the sand lot. They don't sting, but they do bite. We had different classifications for them based on their leg stripes, body stripes, and antenna. You had your regular bees, prince/princess, and king/queen. For a boy's birthday, I collected a cardboard box full of them and taped it closed. He liked the present, but apparently a few days later he dropped it in his room. I think it was after that year they switched the substrate from sand to wood chips, which everyone hates because of the splinters. Bro, I did something similar but way less dangerous in elementary school. I've always had a talent for art, so I would draw Pokemon on paper, fold it into a square, and draw a Pokeball on the cover. That meant you caught a Pokemon, and once the kids outside my circle of friends saw it, everyone wanted one too. I would sell them and we'd play Pokemon at recess with the paper Pokemon. It got bad though because it was distracting the class, and kids from other classes started wanting them. So basically I got in trouble and had to stop drawing them. I still remember the feeling of dread of my teacher calling my parents in. Weak. In 4th grade, I developed a method for catching bees using styrofoam cups and water bottles from the cafeteria. The cups have a hard circle in the bottom, the thickness of a finger. You punch that out. Then you take the plastic cover cap from the water bottle's mouthpiece. Water bottles with a sports mouthpiece have a disposable cap seal. Put the cap over the hole in the bottom of the styrofoam cup and hold it in place with one of your fingers. Slam the cup over a bee on a flower in the grass. Bee crawls into the cap due to the light. Slide the cap over, trapping the bee. I failed to create a bee economy though. It was just more of a party trick. I could fill my water bottles with a few bees by the end of recess. Story 9. In 3rd grade, I once had my entire deck of only holographic Yu-Gi-Oh cards confiscated from me for playing with them during break time too much with friends. I was told I'd be able to get them back when I graduated school, 6th grade. I said, okay, not totally understanding what was going on. I forgot about them completely, though I still kept a vested interest in the trading card game for a few more years, like into 5th grade, until 9th grade. I went back and asked my old 3rd grade teacher to return my property. Within seconds, she pulls them out of her desk drawer and hands them to me. It was an odd experience. I had a bunch of Pokemon cards confiscated in elementary school. The teacher said I could have them back at the end of the school year, so on my last day of class, I go to her and ask her if I may have my Pokemon cards back now. She just laughed and said no, she'd thrown them out weeks ago. Screw you, Mrs. Crone, you're the worst kind of person. RIP holographic first edition Blastoise and Charizard. Oh, this brings back memories. I had amassed my own collection of Pokemon cards in the 6th grade. The school decided Pokemon cards were the devil, so they banned them. Little did I know there were teachers who went through kids' backpacks, and I got mine taken with the promise I would get them back at the end of the year. School is done for the year, and my mom and I go to school the day after, and everyone's confiscated possessions and anything lost and found were thrown on a table just sitting there. Of course, my cards were long gone by the first kid who got a free pick of everyone's things. My mom was so livid. Kinda sounds like a stupid reason to confiscate them. Like, wow, you're having too much fun, better put a stop to that. At least I can understand my school's reason for banning trading cards. It was cause either people were playing with ants and would bitch and moan to their parents who would come to the school and demand it be returned, or kids would trade and realize they got shafted and would then bitch and moan to their parents, and you can see where this is going. Kinda upset me as a kid. I was like, why are all of us being punished instead of just the stupid kids? And why are the parents giving in instead of saying, well, you did that to yourself, maybe now you'll learn from this mistake? Story 10. My mom always told the story about my brother bringing a signed picture of Richard Petty to his class and telling everyone he was his dad. 1st to 2nd grade maybe, but that everyone forgot because the next kid pulled out an antique gun. Slightly tangent, but I met Richard, Kyle, and Adam Petty when I was in the hospital a lot as a kid. They came to visit the whole children's hospital several times and slowly realized they kept seeing a few of us there all the time. Adam and I kind of became friends. He was only a few years older than me and we became pen pals for several years until his death. In the late 80s in rural Oklahoma, it wasn't uncommon during hunting season to bring your rifle to put it in your locker, fully dressed in camo and high-vis gear. Even a couple of cheerleaders would bring their rifles. The FFA kids brought cattle prods and all kinds of dangerous stuff. Hell, I ordered a bunch of knives wholesale and would retail them to people. Drugs, chewing gum, and cinnamon oil toothpicks were the only real contraband. But then one kid shows up with a full military M60 machine gun with no ammo, which wouldn't fit in the locker, so he left it in the principal's office. It was for a demonstration, so nobody cared. The principal was a Vietnam vet and said, wow, haven't seen one of those for a while. Then the kid pulled an LAW anti-tank bazooka out of his backpack. The principal wanted to take a look at it out of nostalgia. He looked down the tube, read the nomenclature, and then went white as a sheet. This is live. Everyone get out. The warhead was gone, but the propellant was live. The local fire department came in, all veterans of Vietnam, and deactivated it by discharging it at the lake. They had a raffle for who would get to shoot it. They had a barbecue at the lake to shoot an anti-tank rocket, and no one seemed concerned at all that maybe the kid's dad stole military hardware from his time as a soldier. Story 11. I taught 1st grade and confiscated a piece of broken beer bottles from a 6-year-old. It really surprised me because he was the sweetest kid. Turns out another classmate asked him to bring a weapon and hide it in the playground sand so that he could get it back for another kid. I tried to do more life lesson things than suspension for both boys because they're frickin' 6. But school policy had them both suspended for a few days. Edit. I can't believe this comment got so many likes, comments, and awards. This was seriously just the way life was at the school I taught at. I've taken many years of teaching now to be a stay-at-home mom, but I truly miss the kids I used to teach at this school. They were sweet little kids who just needed guidance. I think about these kids all the time, and I plan to go back to working in a district like this soon enough. They're amazing kids and families who just need a bit more guidance than average, but they can all be successful with the right help. What the fuck did I just read? A 6-year-old was planning to murder revenge plot somebody in the playground sandbox? Dude, we had full-on gang wars in the sandpit as 8-year-olds. It was a massive area with different sections. The sand had become compressed in many places and dirty from trees. It was hard, and you could dig into little chunks using sharpened sticks. So we dug up sand bombs of different shapes and sizes. We even had arms dealers and miners who specialized in digging them, and we'd all fight to control territory and access to gold sand, the most precious commodity. Gold sand was sand you'd find beneath the hard, dirty, leafy top in some places that was somehow still pure and golden yellow clean. You'd happen upon a patch while digging, and then we'd fight over it and try to amass it. It was brutal too. People would get hit in the head, get sand in their eyes and mouths, and they legitimately hurt too. It all went downhill when we drove off a group of younger kids who moved to the other end of the playground, where a clay bank was, and started mining clay bombs. Unlike sand bombs, which would at least shatter, these were basically like being hit by rocks. Eventually, it just escalated to such a point that I think they basically banned any play in the sandpits for a whole year once the general population started being involved. Too many civilian casualties were occurring, and it brought in heat from the teachers. Story 12. Over the course of years, bottle of vodka, hidden in the girls' bathroom by 7th graders. How did you know where to look? Everyone who came back from the bathroom was drunk. So you're not as sneaky as you think. Vape. My mom gave it to me for allergies, so I'll just give it back to her then. Wide eyes. No! Students banging the primers of two 3006 shells together in class. Grab. I just wanted to see if they would go off. I love stories like those first two, where the kid just doesn't have the life experience needed to understand how obvious the lie is or how quickly we can figure out if it is a lie. Like a toddler swearing he didn't steal any chocolate while it's smeared all over his face. That's my father's favorite story to tell about me. I must have been about 5. I woke up early on Easter and started devouring chocolate. My dad told me, no more chocolate, and then when he walked away, I got into it again. I, of course, told him I hadn't been eating more chocolate, which was evidently false due to the chocolate all over my face and wrappers on the ground, so my dad takes the Easter basket and puts it on top of the fridge. What he didn't know until very recently was that after he left for work, I grabbed a chair, climbed up on the counter, got the basket off of the fridge, and went to town more carefully and put it back before my mom woke up. Story 13. Not a teacher, but I watched quite a funny confiscation while in detention, as a sophomore in high school. I was reading a book just trying to make the time go by when our vice principal, who was monitoring detention that day, stepped out for a moment. All of a sudden I hear a cracking sound and I look up from my book to see a broken egg on the floor. The few kids in the room look around at each other confused. Nobody owns up to it, and nobody knows who did it because we were all distracted when it happened. The vice principal returns and doesn't notice the egg, but he's so engrossed in his paperwork that this kid still gets away with throwing another egg. Everyone looks up. The VP asks what that noise was, and this kid holds up a broken pencil and apologizes. Everyone goes back to minding their business, but all the students now know who the culprit is. Finally, this kid threw one last egg, but unfortunately the VP looked up from his papers right as he threw it. He walked over to the kid's desk and asked him what he thought he was doing, and the kid went, "Just cracking jokes." VP holds out his hand and the kid reveals an entire carton of eggs from under his sweatshirt and hands it to him. The VP looks so unfazed that I honestly wondered what else that man had seen. I was honestly glad I got detention that day. My vice principal had been a Vietnam vet. Hell, all of the staff and faculty were. But my VP was also the driver's ed teacher, some kind of coach, a history teacher, and a trigonometry teacher. Seriously, he used his mortar team experience to teach trig. You could occasionally catch him in the 1,000-yard stare. I'd tease the gruff beast with, "Penny for your thoughts, Sergeant." "You're an asshole. I hope you don't want that driver's license too bad." Story 14. Not a teacher, but this is the worst thing I had confiscated. It was 1984, and I was 9 years old. Back then, it was common for parents to buy loads of fireworks for November 5th in Britain, Guy Fawkes Night. I got a load of them on around November 1st and emptied them into a cardboard toilet roll that I'd sealed up at one end, made a fuse from blue touch paper and stuck it in, then used masking tape to seal the top. I was 9 years old. I took it to school and was showing a kid in class during a lesson. The teacher, a guy in his 60s, saw I was distracting people, so called me up and asked what it was. I explained, and he confiscated it. At the end of the day, he called me over, told me not to bring things like that into school, and then gave it back to me. That was the end of the matter until I set it off a few days later and it set fire to a hedge. Kids, the 80s really were a different time. Story 15. So right out of uni, about 25-ish, I took a job teaching at a school in the capital of our country. Lots of poverty and the level of education was low for these teenagers. First day on the job, a kid takes out this hacking knife and starts attacking the furniture with it. For some weird reason, I just walked up to him and demanded he'd give it to me, which worked. But it just as easily could have not worked. During the same job, I also had multiple conversations with students about how sexual misconduct towards the teacher, me, isn't okay. I also got locked in a classroom with 10 angry male students, including the one from the knife incident. In the end, I left because the administration didn't back me up. That's rotten. Teenage dudes are probably the worst to teach for female teachers. I've had so many classmates who act juvenile as hell when they get a female teacher. This year, it was a common joke in my class to say yes sir when answering roll calls to my female teacher because she was mildly strict. She's also quite authoritative, so she gets called bitch a lot behind her back. Luckily, she handled it well. Also sucks because she was an amazing teacher who put a lot of effort into her class. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you'd like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now,